Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother asarimhotep with the Madu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. This is the Mbongi, and today is Monday, January 18th, 2021. It is the national holiday of our good brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my fat brother out of Atlanta, Georgia. And we will continue the legacy of African freedom and liberation. And, we will start today with a little bit of Kujichagulia and self-determination. So we will get into our topic, and that is, this is the second part of the Afro-American religion series. And today is called Nsombedi, and I'll let you know exactly what that relates to and more when we return. Welcome. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. You could be doing anything else, but you chose to be here. So I'd like to thank all of you who are joining us live, and then, of course, those of you who are catching the archives. Shout out to everyone who has made themselves known thus far in the chat rooms. Peace to Brother Chavez and Sister Mika, and Donnie Williams, and Langston Morrison, and Pure Black, and all of those of you who are on Facebook, and those of you who will be joining us a little later. I know I didn't give much promotion for this show, just put it up the last minute, but got to get it when you can. So hold on one second as I make sure that everything is all right on these other platforms for which we are broadcasting, and we will be straight. One day I'm gonna get me a separate engineer who can handle all of that, so I can just focus on the show. But until then, I'll have to do everything myself. So with that said, peace to I Am Not Pablo and Ja Mitzvah. Thank you for joining, and we will get started in just a sec. And so, as I stated at the beginning of the program, this is part 2 to our ongoing and development African American religious series. And so the first time we dealt with the definitions of Bolingo and its relationship to Ma'at and things of that nature. And today I'm going to introduce y'all to a concept called Nsombedi. And that is a term I've decided to attach to African American religion. And we'll get into the deeper aspects of that. So I'm not going to hold y'all long, hopefully. And, those of you who are coming in late, you just have to catch up. And so in the meantime, make sure that you share this program, on your social media feeds, and make sure that you like the program if you like it. You know, if you don't like it, you don't like it. But you know, if you do, please like the program. And if you are new to my channel and you find such topics interesting, you know, this is something that we do all the time here. And, you know, you can learn more and be up to date for when, you know, I post stuff like this. So you can hit the subscribe button and hit the subscribe bell so that you are notified immediately when I upload or when I register, um, you know, for a new, you know, show to be live. So with that said, let me share my screen on this other computer real quick. And I think I'm gonna go full screen. Oh, I thought I opened this program already. So let's do this. And why is my screen? Something's making it act a little slow. So I don't know what's going on. It was open earlier. And so I'm trying to see what is going on here. You turn this night light off, first of all. I thought my screen was a little darker than usual. So let me, I don't know what's going on here and why it's not giving me my options to open the document. So let me see if it's an issue of, let me close some things out real quick and go back. Is there a way that I can refresh this for some reason? I may have to log out and come back in. Nope, there we go. For some reason, it's acting really, really slow. So in the meantime, I see a few more people have come in. So peace to Brother Duarte out of Brazil, that guy. Peace to you, B-Style Kennels, and Pure Black. I don't know if I said your name already, but if I did, you get a double shout out. And who else? Firelight and Tish, thank you for joining us. And again, everybody else who is on Facebook, hopefully the Facebook comments come through. They've been kind of wilding on that. So now that I got it up, peace to Flint Martinez. Okay, now I'm ready. So as I stated before, this is part 2 in the series on the need for an African American religion. And so I'm calling this Nsombedi. And I will get into the logic of all of that in just a moment. And keep in mind that this is going to be kind of interactive. So there's going to be a session, or excuse me, a section of the conversation where I'm going to be asking you in the chat room some questions. So I know it's going to be a slight time delay, so you're going to hear me pause so that when y'all hear it, y'all can type in your answers. And then when I see your answers, then I will respond, you know, appropriately. So as always, this is brought to you by the Diopian Seals. And then SEALS is an acronym which stands for STEM, which is, you know, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, Egyptology, agriculture, and linguistics. And we deal with mathematics linguistics and logic over here. So, more of that to come. And of course, the Luja Volume 2, which is you can find on sale right now on my website at asarimhotep.com, as well as the book Towards a Comparative Dictionary of Chicana and Modern African Languages, also available on asarimhotep.com. And for those who want to support the channel and support the upcoming documentary, please consider joining the Patreon page. And so that's patreon.com/asarimhotep. And you can also make donations on the asarimhotep.com website. So, and peace and blessings, and shout out to all of the new Patreon members. And there are perks and things that you can find out when you visit that page. So now we're going to go into part 1 of our discussion. And peace to Conan Lee, all the way at the UK. So I know it's late out there. So I hope you don't, have nothing to do early in the morning where you need your rest. But I appreciate you joining us live, as always. And so, as I mentioned before, this is an act of self-determination. And as Dr. Malana Karenga in his book Kwanzaa, informed us, he says, the first act of a self-conscious and self-determining people is to redefine and reshape their world in their own image and interest. And so we, of course, in the diaspora, and specifically, regarding this topic here in the United States of America, we are the victims of the transatlantic slave Holocaust. And that long series of activities and atrocities have contributed to the great loss of ancestral memory and culture and sovereignty. And so the moment we stepped on these shores, we have, of course, been fighting for our freedom, and at the same time trying to heal ourselves and to regain our sovereignty and our sense of power. And so, many scholars and community activists have proposed different, methods and mechanisms and ideas on how to regain our power and our sense of self. And this conversation that we're having today is in that same tradition. And so what we're doing here is part of that, reconciling ourselves, with our history and our ancestral goals and missions, for our future generations, coming ahead of us. And so, this path of self-determination, involves this process in terms of redefining and reshaping the world in our own image. And so for too long, those of us in the diaspora, and in particular, those of us in the United States, have grafted to ideologies that were not of our own, and they have helped to shape, for better or for worse, our sense of thinking and our sense of self and value. And a lot of the times, these external visions of ourselves have been detrimental, to us. And so we are in this process of renaissance and reformalization. And as I stated earlier, this conversation is part of that ongoing process. So, even though I'm speaking directly to, or more specifically in terms of the African American experience, the ideas in which I'm proposing can be handled by any of us in the diaspora, for our own people in our respective areas, whether we are in the UK or whether we're in France, whether we are in Brazil, whether we are, in Jamaica, Haiti, whatever. The crux of what I'm doing here is just providing an example of how all of us can reconstitute and re-visualize ourselves, and move forward on that, but being grounded, of course, in our ancestral memory, uh, not only in the places where our immediate ancestors were born and lived, but our more ancient ancestors on the continent of Africa, into this day. So, as John W. Vandercook, have reminded us, via Dr. John Henry Clark, a race is like a man until it uses its own talents, takes pride in its own history, and loves its own memories. It can never fulfill itself completely. And I believe this wholeheartedly. And so I have took it upon myself to, in many respects, kind of lead the charge in the self definitions of African American people, and so that we can build off of our own culture, and we can capitalize on our own culture, uh, and take control of our own culture and power. So, many of you have seen recently, the starting with the renaming of African American people. So throughout this conversation, you will hear me say Ba and Kole, and African American interchangeably. And so the word, Nkole, is a word for an eminent and powerful, person. And so Ba Nkole are the eminent and powerful people. This is a word that is used to, represent, divinity, and spirit. And so it speaks not only to our living experience, but also, uh, our spiritual, endeavors and constitution. And so it's an all-encompassing term. And so, we see this sun emblem, over the top. And so this is our totem. And, it is, chock full of meaning. And so there's a whole video on this. And, y'all can search for that on the YouTube channel, and it will come up. I just wanted to go there. So then it came time to naming the ongoing developing African American, now the Ba and Kole religion, and I labeled it Bolingo or Malinga, and it's a word meaning love. And so these are the reflexes that you find in Africa. For example, Bolingo, love; Lingala, Bolingo; Kolingo, love, love. You see these other variations: love, charity, precious, beloved; love one another, to be charming; to love, appeal, to delight in; how to love. And so the religion itself is grounded in this principle of love and open hearted sharing. And so there was a video also done on that, so you can go to the YouTube channel and, learn more about that. You can also pick up the book "Where Is the Love? How Language Can Reorient Us Back to Love's Purpose," which was published back in 2015, for some deeper insights into that as well. And so that word Bolingo or Malinga is cognate with the word Ma'at. So our religion will be built on the fundamental African principles which manifested itself in ancient Kemet as the concept of Ma'at. Again, all of that is explained in the lecture, online, as well as the book "Where Is the Love?" And so, I introduced these, two concepts. So, when we're talking about the word religion, we, I've utilized the name Aluja. And for many of y'all know that I published 2 books under that title, Aluja Volume 1 and Aluja Volume 2. And so when we, just to start utilizing more African terminology to reconstitute our tongue and into saying African terms, so that we're used to how they sound, and of course what the underlying meaning and psychology of all these concepts and stuff mean. So, I have a tendency to borrow, or I should say Sankofa words coming from the Bantu languages, but I also utilize stuff from, like Yoruba language and of course ancient Egyptian. But usually if I use an ancient Egyptian, I try to find a modern cognate for it. So that we know how it is pronounced, and there's no controversy over the term. And so I also introduced this concept called kimoyo as a substitute for the word spirituality. And kimoyo, as introduced to us by Dr. Fukiao, is the art of vitality. And I've expanded the meaning to reflect the art of adding life to life, of vitality and prosperity, and of course, the art of making things to flourish in all areas of life. So these are key concepts that I would love for us to utilize on a consistent basis. So if these concepts resonate with you, I encourage you to use them in your own conversations and even in your own books, and that in articles and things that you may be reading and things of that nature. So, that word Aluja, which I equate with religion, comes from Chiluba, and it means to make or provide, to retrace one's steps, to refer to a place of origin, or to restore. It has a reflex in the ancient Egyptian language as Rouge, and it means to strengthen, to maintain, to perpetuate, to flourish, be prosperous, successful, enduring, permanent, sturdy, steadfast, remain firm, firmness, consistency, to be strong, to prevail over, to develop competence and ability. And so, when it has the causative prefix, it means to make, secure, to make right, to provide, to fulfill a contract, to restore, to repair, to make new again, to grow, and to flourish. All of these, in synthesis, is what a communal religious tradition is about. It's about strengthening human relationships and putting together an algorithm for in a way of living, so that when the life fluctuates, whether environmental or whether through human relationships, you have a process and a way to restore and to repair those broken relationships. And so that's what a religion is. There's a whole conversation that I had on that, so you can again go to the video on YouTube and on my channel. But quickly, an algorithm is a set of guidelines that describes how to perform a task as a process or a set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. But as Dr. Wade Nobles defines a culture, and which I also equate with this, as a process that represents the vast structure of behaviors, ideas, attitudes, values, habits, beliefs, customs, language, rituals, ceremonies, and practices peculiar, in quotes, to a particular group of people, and that provides them with a general design for living and patterns for interpreting reality. So what we're involved in here is what I call the African American Cultural Development Project. And, we are looking at our history, and we're taking the best of our traditions, and we are putting it and synthesizing it
and institutionalizing what we have developed so that we can use it to empower ourselves and regain our sense of sovereignty for our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren. And so, in that, of course, the central role of human relationships is central to that. So when we talk about kimoyo, again, that art of adding life to life, it is reflected in this particular text here uh, in African religion, the moral traditions of an abundant life, which uh, the author states, we must start from the life concepts of African clan society. Life is so central that it must be characterized as sacred. God is understood as possessing life in its fullness and at the source of life. Humans have the inalienable responsibility for protecting and prolonging the life of the community in all its aspects. Morality is quite simply the determination of whether an action promotes or diminishes life. The Tanzanian theologian Laurenti Magesa sounds a very similar note. For African religion, all principles of morality and ethics are to be sought within the context of preserving human life and its power or force. The sole purpose of existence is to seek life and to see to it that human life continues and grows to its fullest capacity. And so all of this is what we say here, we summarize in this key concept called kimoyo. It's the ability and the art of adding life to life. Again, there's a whole conversation that I have about that. And so, you know, um, you can search for that on YouTube. As I should have added this on the slide. Also suggested a name for Africa called Bukanda, and so this is a slide from that conversation. But going back to Lorenzo Magessa, when we're talking about this nature of religion, we got to understand what a religion is, and understanding that it has to deal with the relationship between people. And so as Magessa informs us, he says that bondedness is the key to the understanding that what falls on one falls on all. In such a relationship, the issue is the re-establishment of community, the re-establishment of the circulation of life, so that life can go on transcending itself, go on bursting the barriers or the intervals, the nothingness, or go on being super abundant. The ethical consequence is that we must repair every breach of harmony, every wound and lesion. We must demand reparation for ourselves because we are not merely ourselves, and for others because they are also ourselves. That what and who of our pre-existence and survival, that what or who of some manner of our presupposing ourselves. And so the key point to this is that, again, religion is the establishment, the reestablishment of community and the reestablishment of the circle of life. And so it has to deal with how we relate to one another, and how do we strengthen the bonds between not only members in our immediate household, but the community at large. So keep all of this in the back of your mind when we're having this deeper discussion, when I'm talking about an African American religion, because people want to act like religion is something bad. And I guarantee you that most folks don't know what a religion is. So we always have to, define such a thing uh, so that we don't get sidetracked by people's politics. And so, reiterating these key concepts, Aluja being the religion, or just a word, just my African word for religion, which is also the culture, which is also the algorithm. I'm a computer scientist, so we speak in algorithms, processes, calculations, mathematics. Then, of course, there's Kimoyo, the art of adding life to life, of vitality and prosperity, of making things to flourish in all areas of life. And so I introduced the terms Bolingo and Malinga, and I also introduced the term Nsombedi, but I haven't defined it just yet. But what I want to introduce in this slide is this notion that African Americans will and shall have and does have uh, two religious traditions. And so what I'm calling Bolingo or Malinga, which is in development as we speak, is what I would call the formal religion. So this is, something that, we will have in terms of a standard expectations, for behaviors and things for the entire African American community. We're going to have, it's going to be standardized. But then you have the informal religion, which I have labeled Nsombedi. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So for those of you who, are familiar with me personally, you know that I have defined the African American informal religion as home training. And we will see throughout this conversation how home training truly defines the African American internal religious tradition. This is independent of any Christian or Muslim or I should say Islamic, or Judaic experience. This is the religion that we brought with us, the fundamentals, that things that we brought with us over here from Africa to the shores of the United States and the diaspora. And so over the years, we have informally defined it simply as home training. And so when you search the internet and you type in home training, say, you went to Google Images or whatnot, and you typed in home training, this is more than likely what's going to come up. And this is a reflection, of course, of Europeans and their standard and culture. So home training is a capitalistic, I shouldn't say capitalistic, but some people have capitalized off of this. But when they speak of home training, they're speaking of you working out at your home. You're training for something at the house in terms of exercise. That's not what African Americans mean when we say home training. So when even though these are English words, these are not meant in an English context in terms of home training. So when we talk about home training, such visuals come up of Big Mama. And, in some households, it may include a belt, because home training has to deal with the behavioral modification strategies of Big Mama, of Paw Paw, and grandmama and great grandmama, and well, at least back in the day, the community, in terms of disciplining you and instilling certain values. And some of us were a little bit more hard-headed than others. And so, we've been sharing certain proverbs like a hard head makes for a soft ass, because that is a proverb related to home training. So when folks act a fool out in the streets, the first thing African Americans will say about the other person who's acting a plumb fool, however they're acting, is that they ain't got no home training. And another question that will come up is, who raised you? Because there are certain expectations that African American people have for other African Americans when we step out of the house, and that your parents have for you when you step out of the house. Because in our community, you not only represent yourself, you represent your parents and your children and your grandparents and your church home and your fraternity. You represent more than just yourself. So when you act a plumb fool out on these streets, we ask the question, who raised you? Who raised you to act and told you that it was all right to act like that out in these here streets? Obviously, you had little to no home training. That's what we say. And so when we talk about home training, we're talking about the behavior expectations of people. That's your religion, because you represent not only yourself, you represent the community in which you were raised in. And so for harmonious community relationships, you have to be introduced to some fundamentals of life, which starts at the home. So when you out at school and acting a plumb fool, the first people we look at is your parents, because they should have taught you. That's why we ask the question, who raised you when you acting a plumb fool in these here streets? We even have a text out. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of this text. It's called Basic Black, Home Training for Modern Times by Karen Grigsby Bates and Karen Elise Hudson. It's a guide for gracious living that covers the essentials of Black American traditions with updates for the new millennium. Home training is a real thing in the African American community. And so, there's a lot of us who, in our so-called independence, coming from the 90s and 2000s or whatnot, those who were born in, a lot of us felt that our parents may have been a little bit too strict or something to this nature, and we're not going to do the same things to our kids. And now our kids are out here acting a plumb fool because, we have in many respects lost the art and, have abandoned our religion of home training to the point that, You know, we have to write a book and a guide now for you millennial folks who don't know how to act in these here streets. And so the books that you see here, there's actually the same book. The one on the left is older. This one came out in '96, and the one on the right is the updated edition that came out in 2005. And so from the back cover, it says, some call it polite behavior or good manners. Others call it proper breeding. But to most African Americans, it's simply called home training. Now, in Basic Black, authors Karen Grisby Bates and Karen E. Hudson offer a modern guide for gracious living. Contrary to the more traditional etiquette books that most African Americans may find stodgy, I don't even know how to pronounce that, stodgy. I don't like D and G together. My lips can't pronounce that correctly. Off-putting and culturally alien, Basic Black is for real people who live real lives and addresses many of the issues of a growing Black middle class who want to live rich without seeming nouveau. Straightforward, user-friendly, and illustrated with line drawings, Basic Black includes all the information of any well-mannered person would want to know about the social rites of passage, marriage, birth, christening, death, the new corporate workplace, standard work issues, and the more delicate issue of race and its impact in an integrated workplace. Various occasions have guests or being a guest at one's summer home, etc., and everyday rules and rituals that make living in hectic times a little easier. For singles and families alike, Basic Black takes the mystery out of conventional etiquette and will arm the reader with the ability to be comfortable and confident in just about any situation. And so, for African Americans, it's about how do you act in public? That's the question that home training essentially is dealing with here. So we got to get back to basics. That's why it's called Basic Black. And here are some basics in terms of home training that many of us, may be familiar with. And so I got this from a website. The link is on the second slide. So it's a total of 5. So these ain't all, but these are just some basics from the website that I looked at. And so some basics: to wait before entering someone else's house. Most children barge right in as soon as the door is open. They're excited and eager to play and explore. We have to teach them to greet the person who opens the door and wait to be invited in. So you just don't just be rushing into people's house. You always got to be invited in. You wait till you're invited. And when you enter that house, you better speak to everybody who's in the house, or else it's going to be some problems. So you see somebody just rush in and barge in somebody's house or come in and don't speak to everybody, for a fact that they ain't got no damn home training. And so the second one is how to introduce themselves to adults. Every child over the age of 6 should be able to confidently look an adult in the eye when being introduced. Our children should also be able to tell the adult that they are being introduced to their name and some basics in an audible voice. For example, hello, Mr. Johnson. I am Janet and I am 7 years old. I attend XYZ Elementary School. They should know how to talk to adults. To say please and thank you. This should be a regular part of their routine at home, school, or in public. The more they practice, the more these courtesies become second nature. You got whole folks who will get stuff, and people will offer and get them stuff and don't say thank you or ask for something and don't say please. No home training whatsoever. Oop. Second slide. How to talk to adults respectfully. And, living in Philly, you seeing these young folks, just wild and don't know how to speak to adults. No home training whatsoever. The author of this says, I grew up in a traditional Southern household where phrases like sir and ma'am were as holy as anything in the Bible. Many grew up with a different standard and view these terms as archaic and unnecessary. That's fine, as long as we teach our children that they cannot talk to adults the way that they talk to their peers. And yes, Mr. Johnson, will take them much further than, yeah, okay. You know, I grew up in the house, so you better not. If mom's or dad, asks for you, you don't say, huh, saying or what. Boy, you would have got drop kicked in the throat and then choked out and then woken up and then knocked back out, responding all crazy, saying to an adult. I, to this day, to even, elders who are senior to me, like 25 years or so, still, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. And yes, I grew up in the South, and, it's just a home of home training. Lastly, how to act in another person's home. While we want our children to feel comfortable in any setting, they need to be aware of how to act when they are in someone else's home. A good rule of thumb is for them to ask before they act. They should ask before they help themselves to food and ask before using items that don't belong to them. Basics. A lot of this seems basic to a lot of us, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't have these basic common instructions and just be acting a fool. That's why, you have expectations. Your mama give you instructions before leaving the car. When I get in this store, you don't want nothing. Don't ask for nothing. Don't be running around in this dang store. Don't hit me with that dang basket or I'm going to drop kick you in the middle of the aisle. That's the generation I grew up in. And there's the link, at the bottom, for where I got this from. But as you can see, we're talking about common courtesies that will help you to go far in life. And these, you don't go to church to get these. You don't go to school or institution. You don't need a degree in this. All of this stuff is given to you at the house. So now, going into the second part of our conversation on the relationship between sitting and religion, in quotes, from its African context. So it's going to seem a little bit, you may not catch what I'm about to say, but y'all know that I always build up and lead up to some things. And so we're gonna show how important this concept of sitting really is. So, for example, like when in many African languages, when you ask someone, where do you live? The literal translation is, where do you sit? There is a relationship between the idea of sitting somewhere and living or dwelling. And then it also extends to the dwelling place. So, for example, when you say the word reside, it's really to resit. And then, you reside, and then that same word becomes residence. And so this is common throughout the world. But where you sit is where you stay and where you live. So you have, for example, in Chiluba, Chikomo, Inkum, or Inkam, or Mukam, meaning to sit, or a location. There's also a variant, Shikama, sit, be seated, be seated. It also means to wait and be quiet. And I have that bolded and in red for a reason. And so if y'all can if y'all have pen and paper, write that down. Shikama, sit, be seated, and also to wait and be quiet. There's also ikala, to sit, to remain, and to be still. I would write that down if I was you. A synonym in Chiluba, and many of you may recall that, one of my articles on the etymology of the word Kemet proposed this relationship of sitting and being in a place, like a country and things of that nature. And so this paragraph comes from that article in which I wrote. So a synonym in Chiluba is somba, to sit, to live, to reside, to conduct, to sit down, to chat, to retire, and to relax. Reflexes of that root is chisombelu, Sombetti, which means living room, lounge, or residence. So remember that word Sombetti. And so that word Sombetti is going to come up again, but this is a different prefix, chi. So it deals with a place. So it is the place in where you sit, live, reside, conduct, chat, retire, or relax. Chisombelu, Chisombedi. And so when the L sound is followed by I, the L turns into D. And so we continue, Lusombela or Chisombedi, where one sits, also shelter. A similar semantics exists in the Yoruba language. So we have gunle, and that word gun is the main root here, to settle, and you also find a reflex in Arabic, a comma, meaning to settle, to stay in a place. So, continued. Again, we were introduced to Chikama, the sit or be seated, to wait, to be quiet, and Shikata, to sit, live, reside, conduct. Shikika, fixing, establishing, demonstrate, prove, place, and Shikuku, to recover and growing. I just want to highlight this word because we saw it as well in Ikala, and that is conduct or to conduct. And it's a word for conduct and carry. And then in its noun form, we know it's conduct. And so when we talk about certain behaviors, we say it in English the way that you conduct yourself, the way that a person carries themselves, tells a lot about their mannerisms and their values and things. And so these words, meaning to sit and to be seated, is also reflected in the meanings, meaning to wait, to be quiet, also to chat and to conversate, and conversate is a word, and to conduct and conduct. And we'll see this more deeply in just a little bit. So I want to give you these concepts so that you have a firm foundation on what we're building here. So there is an article that you can find online written by Felipe Evangelista and Rosa Vieira, and it is titled "You Must Have People to Make Business: Relations of Proximity and Small-Scale Trade in Haiti and the Democratic Republic of Congo." Hold on one sec. Naja Phillips asks, Asar, is the sitting related to sit in Hebrew? For example, when the Bible reads, he sat in the gate. I believe sat or sit here implies some sense of making decisions or judging cases. I'm not sure. I will have to go back and analyze and see exactly what words are being used in that context and get back with you on that. Okay, getting back to the article here. It says you must have people to make business, relations of proximity and small scale trade in Haiti and Democratic Republic. And so, what these authors are discussing in the larger context is how relationships are invaluable to the the conducting of business and trust in all of that, and how there's similarities and parallels in terms of worldview that you find in Haiti as well as in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so, which shouldn't be a surprise because we know that there are individuals, there are ancestors of ours who were taken from the Congo and brought to the diaspora in Jamaica and especially in Haiti and especially in Brazil. So you know it's not surprising these parallels. But what I'm going to cite from the article are these two paragraphs regarding what's going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a concept that is going to be real important that relates to what we're talking about here, and ultimately to the topic of home training. And so the authors state, in the dry season between May and September, it is not easy to buy many gallons of palm oil. It rains seldom. There are less fruits on the palm trees to produce the oil, and the price increases. This prompted Ma Julie, who a woman that the authors interviewed in Congo, to turn to sources of income other than her trade in gallons. So she trades. She goes to the marketplace every day and trades and in this palm oil. So what they're saying is that, you know, between May and September, because there's less rains and things, the palm fruits and things are not as abundant. So she has to turn to other means of income to kind of supplement what she loses out in palm oil sales. So she began to rent land in another village to plant beans and sell them in the city. Unlike her home village, this was not a place where she had family and people. The first time she went to plant, she slept in the house of the owners of the land she had rented. The second time, the house was no longer available. Ma Julie ended up sleeping in the house of Ma Tania, a young woman she had met only recently. When I asked Ma Julie how she had begun to frequent this house, she replied, and this is what's going to be important, I know how to relate in Yebi Vanda. I make some food. I give a little bit of sugar to people. We get on well. I can relate Navandi bien with anyone. You need to know how people behave. And so you'll notice in these two expressions here that there's a common root. We have Nayebi Vanda, and then we have Navandi Bien. And so we're going to get into the definitions of what that means. But notice what I have here in red. You need to know how people behave, because people's behavior is critical in terms of doing business here. And so notice also that she says, I know how to relate. So this Nayebi Banda has to deal with relating to people. And she says, I make some food. I give a little bit of sugar to people. We get on well. meaning I share what I have, because when I share food, and there's an expectation, and if they have, they would share as well. Now we're relating. So this concept of sharing food comes up again in terms of my bolingo, malinga, that I talked about on occasion. So now we continue the conversation. And sorry, I don't have page numbers. It was online, so I'm pretty sure there's a PDF version of it. But if again, if you type in that title at the top, you must have people to make business, and put it in quotes in Google, you'll be able to find the article so you can read it in its entirety. And so the author continues. As we can see, Ma Julie uses the term Vanda, which has various senses in Lingala. Two in particular are important to understanding the meaning of relating with another. It can be used, hold on one sec. Okay. It can be used. Man, I lost my place again. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking at this other computer. So it can be used in the sense of dwell. So Vanda can be used in a sense of dwell. Where do you live? O Vanda Wapi. And it may be said that knowing how to Vanda also involves knowing how to live with the other. As Ma Julie makes clear, it presumes knowing how to share food and space, whether a house, a market, or a neighborhood. To some extent, it would even be possible to conceive the idea as knowing how to dwell in the other person, because knowing Vanda bien requires comprehending the other to the point of putting oneself in their skin, understanding the difficulties that the other person is facing. Vanda is also used to revert to the verb to sit. Sit on the chair. Vanda nikiti. And we can venture the idea that knowing how to Vanda, knowing how to sit, how to dwell, how to live with the other, also entails knowing how to sit with the other, since the act of sitting is closely associated with conversation. So remember the other words that I mentioned earlier, and how the same words for to sit in these other languages also is the same words for to chat and have a conversation. In Lingala, for example, before starting a conversation, people will usually say, "Come, let's sit. Yaka tovanda nabiso." Or, "Do you want to come over to the house? We can sit and chat." Okoya na ndaka to kovanda to kosolala. To sit with someone is to share a moment with them in order to exchange. And this exchange very often refers to commercial activities, whether maintaining partnerships or creating new ones. So this is about, again, so there's what I'm trying to get you to understand, that there's a correlation between sitting home, house, or dwelling space, and behavior. And the things that you learn in the place that you sit has ramifications for how you live out in the world and how well you'll be able to do and conduct business. And so you have to learn the art of being able to live with the other and dwell with the other and have a conversation and knowing how to chat. So just like what we read earlier regarding the African American home training, teaching your children, for example, how to talk to adults, understanding the protocols of the culture, being able to speak articulately and intelligently. These are things you learn in the home, where you sit, and your behavior. So when the woman, going back up, is talking about her terms of relating, you need to know how people behave, how people vanda, how people sit. And so that term comes up again. Hold on one second while I take a sip. Excuse me. So this paragraph here is from my Aluja Volume 1 book. No, my bad. This is also I'm sorry. This is from the 2014 Kemet article that you can find on my academia.edu page. And so I state, as I mentioned earlier, in many African languages, when you ask somebody where do they live, the question is, where do you sit? So matter of fact, when we go back up here, I think she kind of says, or the authors kind of say that. Let me see. I saw it somewhere. Oh, there we go at the top. In terms of that term Vanda, it can be used in the sense of dwell. Remember that the word to dwell or to reside is the same word to sit, to literally sit down. And so it's where do you live? O Vanda Wapi. Literally, where do you sit? And so within that context, I state the seat in African societies is a symbol of the primary location in the community where the spirit of the ancestors are virtually still making commandments and guiding the community. I'm talking about, I'm having a discussion here about African thrones. See, people think they know what a throne is. A throne is a shrine. It is a seat. And then you have a physical person who sits on it, but that physical person is only a vessel for ancestors to dwell within them to govern, because it's always the ancestors or spirits that govern the society in traditional African societies. And so when you talk about a king, that person is only a vessel, you know, for spirit. And so when every time the king sits on the throne or the stool, he's sitting on a shrine for where the ancestors come and dwell when he's ruling, so that he is being guided by the forces, the guiding forces of the community and the lineage. And so that's the greater context of this particular citation. So I'll start again. The seat in the African societies is a symbol of the primary location in the community where the spirit of the ancestors are virtually still making commandments and guiding the community. The seat is the landing place for the ancestors. The seat can be seen in many ways as an altar or shrine. In the Congo, a seat is used as an emblem of the ancestors being welcomed on their journey back to the community from their realm in the forest or ocean. In the Congo, they have a body pose or gesture called nuvianda, which can be seen in the Kumina religious tradition in Jamaica. The word nuvanda means welcome to the ancestors, but has a literal meaning of please have a seat. And so this is Kikongo. So this new Wanda is the cognate of the word Vanda that we saw in Lingala in the other citation. And so this phrase here is a call or a welcome to ancestors. Again, when you welcome the ancestors, you're saying, please have a seat. Please live, please dwell here for the moment. And so you see this logic and semantics even in ancient Kemet. So it's no coincidence that in the ancient Egyptian script, for example, you find that these various words for ancestors all are terminated with a divine ruler or whatnot sitting on a chair. What does sitting on a chair have anything to do with ancestors? Why is that the terminating symbol for these ancient Egyptian terms? So we have Tepi Hawa, those of former times, ancestors, forebearers. Tepi Ha, those of former times, ancestors, forebearers. Barahe, ancestor, predecessor, one who came before. Imiharit, ancestors, predecessors, those of former times. Why these different words all have these symbols of these people sit down? Because there's a relationship between, when you call on the ancestors, you're telling them to have a seat, because the seat is the altar for ancestors. But these are also emblems for the king. And as I mentioned before, the king is just the living representative, the avatar for the ancestors, more specifically the primary ancestor that started that particular lineage. That's who has the power. And so all of this comes together when you're able to study African cultures intimately. And so the ancient Egyptian informs the Congo traditions, and the Congo traditions inform the ancient Egyptian traditions. And so we'll continue. And so those symbols, those hieroglyphs that we have there that are the determinatives or the classifiers, is the Gardner is represented by the code, the Gardner sign A50 and A51. And they have the pronunciation of Shepes or Shepesi. So that's how you would pronounce these words. I mean, well, we don't know how you pronounce them per se, but these are the consonants that are associated with these two glyphs. And they're used for these words here that you see here at the bottom. So Shepesi, Shepes, a noble, august of gods, splendid of buildings, valuable, wealthy man. Noble, splendid, rich, valuable, costly, precious, noble, august, splendid of buildings, magnificent. To establish, to endure, image, statue, statue, image. So like when you notice, for those of you who are familiar with ancient Egyptian temples and statuettes, their statues are just like this. And, we may need to have an entire discussion on the statues as shrines for the spirit of those ancestors for which they represent. And so you see that drawn here. These are the big statues and thrones or whatnot. So that's why, it is associated with these concepts here. But what I wanted to point out is this word Shepes, to establish, to endure. If you have Aluja Volume 2, and you have or have not read chapter, I think it's 3. Yeah, etymology of Seneb and health. You will have read or have read where I establish that the word for ak, which you see right here with this bird symbol here, which means is really Iraqi, and cognate with Orisha, but that's an upcoming book that's going to come out later on this year. So just a heads up for y'all. But this word meaning deceased, blessed spirit, the ancestor. It comes from a root meaning to last or to endure. And so it's no wonder why this same word here, to establish, to endure, is also used for uh in these the symbols for this is also used in the words for ancestors, as we see right here, because it has to deal with age and longevity. And so when you talk about an ancestor, this word here, which a lot of us pronounce as ak, has nothing to do with them necessarily being dead, like, to die. That's not what the word means. It is to last, to endure, to age, to exist perpetually. And so those are the shepesh. Those are the orisha, the araku there. So more of that will be given in the upcoming text. But that word, or this concept here, is what we call somba. And so again, somba, to sit, sitting, to cause to sit, to live, resting, retiring. Chisombelu, living room, residence. Lusombela, where you sit. Sombela, to talk or discuss. So remember that even with those other words meaning to sit, it also reflects in these other, it's the same semantics. To sit is a word for to talk and to discuss, to chat. Because when you're having a conversation with someone, ideally you're sitting with them having the conversation. I guess people didn't back in the day used to walk and talk, as they say. But to have a true discussion, to really get to know each other, you have a sit down and talk. But notice this next one here. Nsombelu, Nsombedi, Nsombela. How to behave. Your conduct. Therefore, we're talking about home training. And then this other word, sombesha, sombelela, companionship, conversation, chat. Well, I want to highlight, because this is the suggestion that I have for African American informal religion, Nsombedi, how to behave, how to conduct yourself, home training, because the word here, the root, somba, has to deal with sitting and to live, and sombelu, your living room, your residence, your home. And then with another prefix is how you behave, your conduct, that which you learn from your home in sitting. And so we're talking about your home training, Nsombedi or Nsombedi, some may pronounce it in Congo. So remember that when the sister Ma Julie, talked about Bunda this, Bunda that, she was talking about relating to people, and you got to know how they behave, how they sit, what kind of instructions they got from the house, because that will tell you, who they are and how you can conduct and do business with them. And so I want to propose to you that the word somba is also cognate with the ancient Egyptian word hatep without the prefix. So the root is tep. And we'll get into that in just a slide or two. And so the word hatep derives from a root tep, which means to put on or to sit or to place on top. And so to sit or to place on top is the same process, is being on something. And so when you see hatep, that is to stay or to fall out of hair, meaning to drop or to fall. Hatep, altar, offering slab, because that's where you put on your offerings, the offering slab. And hatep, because of the root meaning to descend or to fall, meaning the setting of the sun or to set of the sun. And because, you know, falling and or descending is also the word for to lay down, meaning to rest. Hatep, rest, for example, in the tomb, or to assume, titulary. Hatep, resting area. And then it's also the word for food, offerings, and meal. So remember what the sister said before with the word for Vanda in relation, that she also connected it to her sharing food. And so if many of you recall from my other lectures, when we're doing food offerings to ancestors or other spirits, it's not, I don't like to use the term offerings, but a more accurate term in English is sharing of food. Because when you're talking about sharing, it is more so of a communal, you automatically think communal with it. And so part of that process, part of your home training is your ability to share what you have. You know, not just eat in front of people and not offer them any. That's what you learn at the house. And so, you know, you have like the phrase, iti or hotep, which is a welcome, which is literally, I have come to have a seat or come to have a seat. And so many will, the word hotep also means peace. Many people say, saying to come in peace, but it's a literal translation of seat. And so we can verify these things, of course, examining other African languages. So in the Collagen language out of Kenya and in places like Uganda, in Ethiopia, in the western parts of Ethiopia, you'll find the Collagen, also known as the Nandi, and other names. But in their language, well, first I'll give the definition of tepi. He who was on, over, above someone or something, a leader, a chief, or a captain. It also means to place, to put on something. And so, and also to descend. So in Collagen, you have the same word tep, and it's suffixed by C. That's their causative suffix. So how in ancient Egypt, for those of you who are familiar with the script, the S is the causative. It is placed in front of the verb. In Collagen, that same S prefix is suffixed. So tepsi. So it would have been satep if it was in Egyptian. But it's to place on top of, or to cause to be placed on top of, or cause to sit down, to enthrone. Tepi or tep, stay. Tep otin, to sit down. T imtun, that's actually Coptic, which means to sit down. And then, so that's coming from Sambu's text, but there's also an online dictionary for Collagen. And they primarily, whatever dialect that they're gathering most of their words from, the P sound that is prevalent in Dr. Kipkowitz Sambu's dialect is B in whatever it is dialect that they use for the online Collagen dictionary. So they have Teb, to rest, to stay, to sit, and timbes, to relax, to rest. And so, as I stated earlier, the word hotep comes from a root tep, meaning to put on, to sit. And this is reflected also in these variants of the word, hotepi, meaning furniture, or hotep, to occupy a seat or a throne. And so you would say the word hotep in collagen as katepi, to sit. Katepi inge charit, to sit on a stool. That's the phrase. And that phrase has to deal with a marriage ceremony or whatnot. And so we're seeing these concepts, everywhere, and it's all across Africa. And so it is from this concept of sitting, dwelling. Remember what I told y'all to write down at the beginning, that these words meaning to sit in these African languages also means to dwell, to reside, but also to be quiet, to be still. And it is from this concept that the word hotep emerges. And so let's go back. We saw these different variations in meaning to rest, to stay. And from this concept of resting and staying or whatnot, do you get the concept of peace, to dwell in quiet, to have stability, to, not to be ratchet everywhere. And so from a root meaning to sit, to place on top, derives hotep, to be gracious, contented, pleased, to be at peace, become calm, to go to rest, etc. And so you can see those definitions in Faulkner, page 190. And so I hope y'all see how all of this is coming together, and this may take a second viewing, for a lot of you. And so, we confirm the S, consonant sequence with TEP. A few examples here, like you have TEP is a word for type of invoice or capital or principal. It has to deal with money. And so in Chiluba, it's primarily a verb, meaning to buy, to get. Chisumba, trade. Musumbi, a buyer or a customer. And possibly related to this form somba, meaning to borrow, or sombeshi, to lend or to rent. And then there's kasumbela, interest rate. Kasumbelo, or lu, interest on a borrowed sum. And so you have this word tep, dagger, which has a reflex as hasebet, knife. And in Chiluba, you just have it more so, again, the verb is primary. So it's sumba or sumpa, to brandish like a weapon, to reveal a weapon, to wave a weapon. And but the other word for knife is mulumbo. And there's a way that this can be related to this, but that takes another series of sound meaning correspondences, which I have done, but I want to try to keep this concise and focused. So you have tep, meaning the best. And in Chiluba, you have ensambu, best or the most, further and more. Haseb, to hunt with a throw stick. Then you have somba, to hunt, to fish. And what I also demonstrate is that tep and hotep has reflexes as seb or haseb. So this comes from a larger correspondence or a larger discussion somewhere else. So for what do I have here? Yeah, so tep for formation of the abstracts, and then tepu, fields. So any of y'all who has followed my work or Jean-Claude and Boli's work, you know that the grammatical forms for the abstract derive from roots meaning the ground or place. So it ultimately comes from a root meaning foot, and then foot, leg, and then ground or place. And then from ground or place, it is used grammatically as either a prefix or a suffix of abstractness. So that's why you see like bu in Egyptian as well, which is the foot sign. When it's prefixed in front of a word, it's the word for abstract. It's the grammatical feature of abstraction. So that's why we have tep for the formation of abstractions, and then tepu, fields, in the same category. And so it's Nzumbu, dwelling, house, abode, domicile, home, hut. Okazubu, field, cell, unit, etc. It's a place. And then with the reflex, haseb, ground, or haseb, garden, plot, meadow. So it's all having to deal with a field, a place, a space, a location. And so even though the rest of these are S sounds, as the voiceless sibilant, the voice sibilant, the Z, is in this example here. But what I want to show is that in Chiluba, this last word is not, I'm not relating it to anything up here, but just showing y'all that Z and S interchange in Chiluba. So this word here is Zaba or Saba, to play, which is Egyptian's Hazeb, to play. And so this sign right here, this so-called pharyngeal, also corresponds to Z in the Egyptian language. And so this is a perfect match. And so now here's where the question and answer comes in for all of you who are listening. So I'm gonna ask you a question. So we've now have linked the concept of sitting to dwelling and living and existing in a place or a home. And that word also being extended to mean to be quiet, to be at peace, as well as to dwell, or I said dwell already, as well as to chat, to have a conversation, but also to conduct and conduct and to behave or behavior. In other words, one's home training. So I want to ask you who are listening live in the audience, and please type it in the chat so that I can read off your responses. Given what I just said, when African Americans in particular see someone out there acting what we call a plum fool, what phrase or response do we say to them? How do we respond to them? So if you saw, like if I said something crazy to you in the grocery store or whatnot, what is a typical response that someone would say? So keep in mind everything that I just said in terms of the words sitting, meaning dwelling and living and home trading and all of that other kind of stuff. What I'm gonna see if y'all will make the correlation before I say it. And it's related to home training amongst African Americans. Let me see how much y'all know about your own tradition. So I'm gonna wait a second. I'm gonna wait a few moments, because again, this is live, and we have a time delay from when I'm speaking and then the lapse in time for when it is conveyed to your ears. So I will just wait a moment. So what is the natural response? I'm seeing it. I'm gonna wait for a few others. Shesmu Patah says, "What's up?" Nope. That's if you want to fight. What's up then? I see Sion or Sion 13. I don't know how to pronounce that. Says to go sit down. and you need to sit down. Sister Naja says, sit down somewhere. And Sion responds again, better go sit down somewhere. And then Sister Mika says to take a seat. And, Vyasa says, sit your ass down. Naja comes back, you outside your mind. And Shesmu says to calm down. Calm your ass down. These are all good responses. But of course, those of you who said something similar to go sit your ass down somewhere. And, for those of y'all who grew up when I grew up and watched the Martin show, you will recognize this character, Angry Man. Every time, Martin would say something crazy or do something, he'd be like, man, sit your ass down. Because there's a correlation between your behavior and then to correct your behavior to sit down somewhere. And these are memes that I just found on, Google Images. I didn't make these up. These are already in the culture, already circulating, on the net. So, you see this one on the left with Denzel Washington. You had your fun. Now sit your ass down somewhere. The next one on the right says, you better keep calm and go sit down somewhere. Our response is for you to sit down because there's a relationship. Because if you're sitting down, hopefully, you will calm down. It's something about sitting and being still and resting and quieting your mind and your behavior. And so this is an expression of African American religion. So another example here, when he says that he is single, but your marriage license is still active, go sit down somewhere with that bull. Or we like to say, you doing too much. Go sit down somewhere. This is the semantics that crossed over with that we brought, with us, from the continent, because we have a correlation between your behavior and sitting. Because when you were sitting at home, you should have been getting instructions from your parents and grandparents and relatives on how to act and behave. So when someone tells you to go sit down somewhere, it is so that you can be re-instructed on how to conduct yourself out in public. Here's some more. If you don't sit your ass down somewhere, it says if you don't sit your ass down somewhere, look. And then I love this t-shirt here on the right. Go sit down somewhere. Signed, every black mama in the world. And sometimes one seat is not enough. You got to tell them to have several seats because they need multiple re-instructions on how to conduct themselves and act in public. So you hear, especially sisters, talking about have several seats. And then this one meme on the right, calling your pastor because that one Shrek-looking chick needs to have several seats. Oop. There we go. I think this is the last ones. I'm going to need you to go take several seats while I sit back and sip on this tea. Then, of course, little Olivia from the Cosbys, have a seat. In fact, have several seats, boo. This is a black woman's go-to when you acting a plum fool according to her standards. Because again, there's a relationship between sitting, calming down, and behavior, because you had to sit to get those instructions. And you should have gotten them at home. So, you have to tell people to have several seats when they have no home training. And so they got to get re-instructed. But there's another aspect to this as well, because when you're sitting, again, you're calm, you're able to focus, you're able to gather yourself. And so that's why, where you sit is where you live and where you rest and where you stay. But you'll also see in African languages, and I should have put some examples up, that to work or to conduct business is the word for to get up and walk or to run. So walking is equated with business and work, and then sitting is equated to dwelling and living, and also to get instruction and the like. So a recap: Somba, to sit, to be seated, to sit down and chat, to live, to retire, to rest. Also Somba, to behave, to carry, to conduct. So remember, when you say the word conduct, you're talking about how you carry yourself. And then also spend his life to live. Chisombelu, Chisombedi, living room, lounge area, residence, your home. Lusombeleli, topic of conversation. Lusombela, Chisombedi, place where we sit. Also a shelter. Chisombi Sombi, to chat. And then Nsombelu, Nsombedi, Nsombela, manner of behaving, your conduct. In other words, home training. But what I also want to extend this conversation and say, we've already equated the word Somba to Tep and Hotep. And so for those of you who may be familiar with ancient Egyptian language in the hieroglyphs and writing, you know of this phrase, Tep Haseb, the correct method. And that word Tep means matter, way, model, and then Haseb, to take into account. And so that word Tep in Hotep, you can tell that is used in a similar way in ancient Egyptian, because it has to deal with how you behave to conduct the way that you carry yourself, the strategies you use in terms of your behavior. So that's when we talk about the manner, the model in which you do things. And so that word in Egyptian is Tep. So Somba is Tep and Hotep in the ancient Egyptian language. And so again, Tep, way of doing something, the manner, the conduct, the method, cipher, key, and example. And of course, as part of that phrase, Tep Haseb, the correct method, norm of reckoning, so to speak. And, method is just another word for method, not important for this conversation, but Tep in erect, working method. And so when you talk about method, like in mathematics, they use this word Tep in mathematics. So it's how you do something. What is the algorithm? What are the steps that you use to come to solving the problem? And that's what a behavior is. How do you behave? And so, you see the word Tep Haseb, used in the beginning of the Rhine mathematical papyrus, for example. The correct method of investigating nature to know all that exists, all mysteries and all things secret. For that purpose, this papyrus roll was copied in the year 33, fourth month of Aket, under the majesty of the king of Upper and Lower Kemet, Wesir may he live. So, this is a similar way. So it's the correct method, the proper way to behave, the proper way to do something. That's what Nsombedi is. The proper way to behave, to conduct yourself. So Nsombedi is the way that you properly conduct yourself in public, the way that you operate, the way that you engage with other human beings, grounded in your training at the house. And then Tep in Tepaseb is the same concept, but applied to mathematics and science. It's the proper way in which you behave, you conduct yourself when you're doing scientific research and mathematical calculations. And so I have that on there twice. Don't know why, don't remember. I had this here for something else. Because again, this was for, because I have an article in Aluja Volume 1 on Hotep, and so I put the whole slide, but there's another variation of this in Chiluba, and you can see this. So like this word jipuka, which means out all of a sudden or to fall, in jipu, to rush out. There's another variant of it, jipoa, to keep quiet, to collect one's thoughts, to meditate. And as I said before, when you're talking about sitting or lying, you're able to do these different things. So that's along the same lines as, peace, to be at peace, to be able to meditate and ground oneself. So do I have that up there? No, I don't. But you see it in the term for rest area, and so that's something that you want to keep in mind. And so Lubachi is the word Hotep, but in the reverse. Without the H prefix, they have Lu. And so it means appeasement, calm, serenity, silence, peace, attention. And so this is a variation. So they got several different variations of the word Hotep in the Chiluba Bantu language. So with that said, that is the end of my presentation. So I appreciate each and every one of you. And for your, why did my thing freeze up? Let me put it back up. There we go. I appreciate each and every one of your participation and for each and every one of you listening live. So, tell me what y'all think. Do you think that my analysis was accurate? And, would you possibly, utilize that term in Sombetti to refer to what I call the informal religion of African Americans? So I'll give it a second to see what the responses are, in the chat. Brother Conan Lee says you brought back some memories. Yeah, this is just, it no matter where we go in the African world, with Black African folks, this is going to resonate. You're going to have some version of this expression, in your culture and community. And so, as I'm saying here, I'm not trying to invent anything new. I'm just trying to help us recognize these aspects of ourselves and to institutionalize what is already characteristic of us and to formally put a name to it, using, African languages and reinforcing it with studies on African languages and culture. So that's exactly what you see going on here. So thank you, Brother Shesmu, and I appreciate you ATL Superstar Show. Know it as having manners, therefore etiquette. Yeah, it has to do with your mannerism, the manner in which you do. Like that's, like I said, that word "tep" means manner, the way in which you do something. And that's where you get the word manners from, because it has to do with the way you behave, the structure, the protocols. So like when we read earlier in terms of how should a young person greet an adult, you know, you don't call adults by their first name in our community. You know, we whatever titles is associated, you call them by their title and then you know their name. So like young people, you know, they wouldn't call me, you know, Asar. They'd be like Mr. Imhotep. You know, that's the proper protocol. That's the proper algorithm. You know, for us to have a meaningful and for us to relate. And so we know who's not African by how, you know, their algorithms, their manners and things. Not saying it's better or worse, but we have a certain protocol. We have a certain expectation. That's why when we see, you know, European people, you know, storming the White House and whatnot, you know, because their candidate didn't win, we say, you know, we expect that from them. But we looked at the brothers and the sisters funny who was out there. Like, y'all should know better. Y'all should have some home training, you know, for those people who went in there and, you know, acted a plum food and now getting arrested and charged everywhere for breaking into a government building. And if you're not going to take over and restructure the government, why take over the building? You just wasted time. And now you probably get fired from your job and all of that because you have no home training. Sister Naja says, I would definitely embrace this concept. We need concise principles to draw from every day. Exactly. And Niger Valley Civilization, peace to you. Say Alafia Ni. Hold on. Did I miss anything going back up? I think for Firelight and Tis, what papyrus, I think I answered that with the rhyme mathematical papyrus. Yep, be humble and sit down somewhere. So, you know, embrace your heritage, embrace your culture. And, you know, as we're growing and solidifying ourselves as a people, you know, I'm helping to find the right words to encapsulate those aspects of our culture. And hopefully y'all will embrace it and uh, utilize it in your everyday experience. So, you know, keep the conversation going. And I will see you all next time. And matter of fact, well, we were scheduled this Wednesday, but it may look like it's going to be moved to next Wednesday. And that is with, I'm going to have an interview. It's going to be early in the morning. But I'll make sure that, you know, the flyers are out there. So those of y'all, you know, who are up that early, you know, can catch the conversation. But it's going to be with Dr. Rebecca Futo Kennedy, and she's a classicist, and she does a lot of work and research on identity in the ancient world. And so we're going to talk about identity in the ancient world and the concept of race and antiquity and things of that nature. So it's going to be a very engaging conversation. I think we're scheduled for 10 a.m. On the, you know, East Coast time. So, you know, all of you in the UK is early enough that, you know, you won't have to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning and So I'll let y'all know when that's going down. So originally we were scheduled for this Wednesday, but it looks like we're going to be we're going to reschedule for next Wednesday or Thursday. So either way it goes, I will talk to you later, and y'all have a blessed day or night, wherever y'all at in the world. And if y'all are looking for ways to contact me, as always, you can hit me up at my website at asarimhotep.com, or Twitter, Facebook, of course, YouTube, and Instagram. And so if you want to make a generous donation to the channel, you can also do that via the Cash App at $asarimhotep. And with that said, y'all have a blessed night and peace.